I'm sad to say that the National Public Radio affiliate in this area refuses to broadcast my weekly program, even though it's free of charge. Where this T-shirt says, "Don't trust the corporate media." You all see that? Actually, it's not true. You can trust the corporate media to lie, to fabricate, to distort, to propagandize. They are providing a service to elite groups in this country, the state and corporations. So you can trust them to do that. And the other T-shirt I have here is, "The battlefield is between your ears. Put up a fight." So very quickly, in the late 70s, because of the atmosphere in the country, I was struck at the level of ignorance among our fellow citizens when it came to Iran and the Middle East. You had, people like Walter Cronkite and the others, badly mispronouncing this country and, really reducing it to a bunch of cliches of flying carpets and Alibaba and Open Sesame and Abracadabra and Aladdin and genies coming out of lamps. And basically, that distorted view of the Middle East, of these countries, Turkey, Iran, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Egypt, continues right through to the present moment. There isn't a lot of nuance and a lot of accuracy about what is really going on in those countries. What is the historical background and context? And I always remember my dear friend and mentor, Howard Zinn, who said, it's so important to understand history. It's so important to have some background information as to why things happen. Otherwise, you think, well, these people seem to be genetically violent. There must be something about Islam that generates hatred and violence, unlike Christianity, which has such a great record, particularly in the 20th century, of nonviolence and, peaceful behavior. Not. And the other religions as well. And so I started doing this program. I began syndicating it in 1986. And those were still the days, the 1980s and 1990s, when NPR stations were a little bit more open to, I would say, progressive perspectives. If you can remember back then, they had commentators like Molly Ivins and Irwin Noel of The Progressive and Michael Harrington. It's unthinkable today that they would have anyone of that caliber representing the left on their airwaves, because they're just categorized as biased and narrow-minded and not really reflecting a broad consensus. So NPR has moved way to the right, and I've written a book about this called "The Decline and Fall of Public Broadcasting." But to make a long story short, in the 80s and 90s, alternative radio was on many, many stations across the country, including WBEZ, the biggest public radio outlet in the entire Midwest, including Oregon Public Broadcasting, the state network, Minnesota Public Radio, huge network, Wisconsin Public Radio. That's all gone, unfortunately, including WOI in Ames, where several people in this room, comrades, heard my program years ago. But nevertheless, the program airs on about 175 stations in the U.S., all over Canada. There's no corporate advertising. Obviously, there's no government or corporate support. And I sustain myself by, sales of CDs and books and giving talks in different parts of the country. Thrust, of course, is to try and present perspectives and points of view that are marginalized or completely eliminated in the corporate-controlled media. And that includes, sadly, National Public Radio and PBS as well, the NewsHour and the Charlie Rose Show. They both depend on a very narrow range of opinion to draw from. They have a golden Rolodex of experts that they call upon to be guests, and you rarely get really a broad perspective. Now, I'm not saying have Noam Chomsky on every night. That's not my perspective. But I think there should be a range of opinion from A to Z. That seems reasonable. Let's hear all points of view. Iraq is a hellhole. No, Iraq is paradise. Iraq was destroyed by the U.S. invasion. No, Iraq was liberated by the Americans. That whole range of opinion. But what you have instead is a spectrum that goes from A to B, not A to Z. And night after night, particularly on the news hour, which I watch, it's very reasonable. People like it. Obviously, the guests speak in complete sentences. They have good command of English. I'm saying that after 8 years of the Bush administration, where people didn't know what grammar was or how to use adjectives and adverbs, for example. But you get guests on. Should we bomb Iran? Let's say Iran. And then there will be a major general on and someone from the State Department. And the discussion will be very, very limited to, well, no, I don't think we should bomb now, but we should certainly, all options are on the table. We should play that card when we need to. And then the other guest is saying, well, no, I think we shouldn't wait. Why take the chance? Let's attack now while we have the advantage. Nowhere is anyone going to say the words that it is an illegal criminal act of aggression in violation of the UN Charter to attack a country that is not threatening you. That is, by the way, the definition of what a war crime is. And again, to go back to why I started alternative radio, enormous amounts of ignorance here at home because of corporate control media, because of the blizzard of propaganda that we're under constantly, the tsunamis of buzzwords like peace process and framework and all the other terms of propaganda that are bombarded to the public. So I want to change that, and that's why I started alternative radio.
Okay.
Well, just to take Canada, our neighbor to the north, the atmosphere is completely different. The media atmosphere is completely different. If any of you have been to Canada, the CBC is much better than NPR. It simply is, both the radio and the TV. And I find in my travels in Canada that Canadians in general have more knowledge about not just local regional North American events, but much better information about what's going on around the world. So all over Canada, from Halifax to Victoria, the program's broadcast. All over Australia, South Africa, England, as well as a station in London that airs us. Through most of the English-speaking world, alternative radio is heard. And of course, you can hear podcasts. You can use your computer as a radio station. You can listen, lots of stations, web stream the programs. And if you just go to alternativeradio.org, you'll find a whole list of free programs and videos and talks that I've given on different topics. So it's alternativeradio.org.
Okay.
Well, I grew up in the 1950s in New York, and my hero was Edward R. Murrow. CBS News, CBS Reports. He made his name during World War II with live broadcasts during the London Blitz, and he would come on in a crackly voice over the telephone lines. He's saying, this is London, under attack. And, it's very dramatic. But Murrow emerged at the end of World War II as the premier broadcast journalist in the country, first in radio, and then as CBS TV developed, he became the main star, let's say, the main voice. And for those of you who go back, way back when, to 1954, I was 9 years old at the time, but I remember watching Murrow's expose of Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin, and what a fraud he was, and how he had, fabricated and made up all these lies about, communists in the State Department, communists running the, White House foreign policy staffs and things like that. Not very far from here, I guess, Wisconsin. Great. So Murrow exposed him. Then he went on to, he created CBS Reports, and he drew some of the creme de la creme of journalists, broadcast journalists. Walter Cronkite was among them. Daniel Shore was the last of them. He died a couple of years ago at age 90, 92. Richard C. Hodelet, Howard K. Smith. So these were Murrow's boys, and this was regarded as the golden age of journalism in the United States. Well, I don't want to romanticize the past. They had some good moments and they had some bad moments. Since the 1950s, what has happened to journalism in the United States should give all of us cause for concern. Because when you have tremendous concentration in one field, particularly in media, you're bound to get very negative outcomes. You don't have to be a sociologist to figure this out. When I started alternative radio, late 70s, well, early 80s, I was concerned then about media concentration. Do you know how many corporations controlled the media in the late 70s, early 80s? Anyone want to guess? Wild guess?
300.
50. And I thought, well, 50. I thought that's too much. That's not good. What are the communication needs of a democratic society? We have 310 million people living in this country. We need, as I said, a broad range of perspectives from A to Z. So what has happened to that 50 when I started out to today? So 50, the first edition of his book, 50 went down to 28. 28 went down to 23. 23 went down to 14. 14 went down to 10. 10 went down to 6. And today we have 5 corporations that basically dominate what most people see, hear, and read, know about themselves, know about their country, know about the rest of the world. And that, I think, has produced real problems in terms of information. A lot of our fellow citizens who are exposed to, corporate media know more about Justin Bieber and the Kardashian sisters and, who Madonna is adopting and whether Angelina and Brad Pitt are going to stay together, how their marriage is doing, things about, baseball, football, sports, I call the media a weapon of mass distraction. It gets people's mind away from reality from areas that have a direct impact on your life.